like, you're 30 for 20. I had a radar hit, and it was going with like 30 knots. And there was something there. It looked like it didn't like a bird. It looked like them getting a rock with me.
Good. Okie doke. Josie, so it would be great to get started with a little bit of your personal journey into the world of veganism. What kind of brought you here?
Oh my gosh. Well, I think it started at a kitchen table when I was 5 in Michigan. I lived right outside of Detroit, and I asked my mom, I was like, Mom, what's chicken made out of? And she goes, well, you know, the chickens at the petting zoo? That's the chicken. We kill it and then we eat it. And I was just like, oh, I didn't eat my chicken that day. And then again at 16 in the kitchen, just breaking down like hundreds of pounds of meat every week and just feeling an aversion to meat after like handling the tendons and all this.
Mm.
And then just eating vegetables and quinoa, not really knowing, not really putting two and two together why it was grossing me out, other than the fact that it just looked gross.
What that initial connection there? You know, when you were saying you're a chef by this point, and you're just, I suppose, the weight of the volume of the amount of living beings that are no longer living that you're handling. Do you think that was kind of an awareness of the life, but that came from seeing these, like you say, the tendons, the physicality? You were relating to it on a kind of empathetic level. What do you think that was grossing you out, or was it much more visceral and like, this is just gross to handle?
I think it was probably both, because you know you get these, you're carving away this meat and not all of it looks good, not all of it is servable, and you're able to identify like veins and then also like perhaps like bruising of the meat
Right.
before the animal was killed, like where it had wounds or something, or like maybe
Yeah.
cancer, and you're looking at this
Oh.
shit and you're just like, what is this? And you're trimming it away and you're just kind of like, man, like this is brutal. So it's probably a little bit of A and
Yeah.
B.
I've heard chefs say that before, and it shocked me when they said it. And it's just interesting hearing another chef say the same thing. That, you know, literally coming across abuse in the food system, disease in the food system, that's kind of almost made it to the point to them. Like, they're the last point of stoppage before that would reach a consumer. Was that kind of like a common experience? Or was that quite a rare thing for you?
Well, it was high quality meat that we were ordering, so
Mm,
it was uncommon. I wasn't seeing it
yeah.
all the time. It's not like working in like a supermarket per se, where you're just getting
Mm,
like loads and loads of different, like low, anywhere from like low to high quality meat. But it was definitely a thing where we would like cut it off and then just send it back to our supplier and be like, reimburse us,
yeah.
because this many pounds was not sellable. So, you know,
Wow.
but that's a good point that you made, that we're the last point. Like, what if every chef, what if we got every chef to
Yeah.
just say, hey, refuse to cook food that is has animal products. Just everyone just
Yeah.
like, just whip out your prep, just throw it all away. Everyone go on strike for a day. That'd be
Yeah.
crazy. Anyways.
Well, you may start that revolution. We'll see. I hope so. I hope so. I hope so. So sorry, I'm derailing things already. So these two these two kind of moments, like 5 years old, and this, I imagine this was something that kept recurring. You having this kind of notion of, this is a living being that I'm consuming here. At what point did that, your experience as a chef with this kind of the sheer volume, at what point did that kind of convert into, actually, I'm eating the quinoa and vegetables probably for some subconscious reason here. I'm going to make this a lifestyle change, and almost like I'm going to wear the badge, if you like.
Well, it actually took me just completely fucking up my whole life to take a look in the mirror and be like, something has to change.
Wow.
And my ex and I, we were both chefs at the time, working for the same, obviously we were together back then, and we were
Yeah.
working at the same place, the same, It's called Fiona's Delicatessen in Colorado.
Right.
And I got fired from my job. Nobody liked me. I was like the kitchen bitch.
Right.
And then shortly after, we like both went into sales to like save money for a restaurant. And he was getting promotions, and I was like doing well, and I was happy, and we were making money, and things were cool. But I told him like I wanted to break up at that point because we were just like very unfocused from the vision of the restaurant. This
Yeah.
is a long story. I apologize.
I like long stories. You go for it.
Okay, thank you. And good, because it is a long one, and I'm trying to give a summary. But basically, I ended up cheating on him, and I never
Right.
thought I would be that kind of person because my mom was cheated on.
Mm.
And so at that point, I was just like, wow, this is what I've come to. And so I was like, I'm clearly not able to articulate my emotions, and I'm clearly not able to have compassion for myself because I didn't want to be in this situation. I put myself in a situation where I ended up creating resentment for not only myself but another human that I really deeply loved, and then I hurt
Mm.
that human. And yeah, my he obviously left, and I got fired from my sales job 3 days later, and everything just like blew into smithereens basically. And I
Yeah.
called my best friend who was vegan. He was back home in Michigan, and I was calling him every week. I was like, dude, I don't really know what to do at this point. And after weeks of leaning on him for advice, he told me, he's like, I went vegan 6 months ago. You should really try it. And I was like, what? Like, my whole identity was built around
Yeah.
being the chef. Like, this is my dream. I gotta own a restaurant. I gotta be the best chef. And that means cooking meat. And eventually I was at such a low point. I was just like, fuck it. I'll do it. I'll try it. And that was how I started, was just being at the bottom, like the lowest of
Wow.
the lows. So unfortunately,
Wow.
it had to take that for me to change.
That's that's probably the most unique story of getting into veganism I think I've heard actually. Like an incredible one. Yeah, but actually makes so much sense. Like when you describe it like that, it's kind of, I don't want to say like logical, but I can understand how you would get to that point of like reflection about who you are and your identity and all of these kind of things. But it still strikes me, although there's a logic to it, like an incredibly, and you alluded to it, an incredibly kind of bold decision, given that you'd taken this career path. You had a this dream of your own restaurant. You've developed this incredible talent. It's so heavily based, that kind of high end, the world of high end kind of culinary work is so based on eating kind of everything. It strikes me as such a bold move to almost out yourself, if you like, as like I'm vegan. So I'm fascinated by that. And how did you even begin that? Because it's one thing like you're a good friend helping you along the way. It's another thing almost, what do I do when I re-enter that world again?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I had no idea how to be vegan. And I was just like, well, I guess what I can do is just make pasta and boil vegetables and then, basically make a really bland veggie soup with pasta. And hopefully that will carry me. And yeah, I lived off of veggie soup and I think cheeseless pizza for like the first month.
When you first sort of came out into this work, and I appreciate you were in a different line of work at this particular point when the breakup happened, the switching to veganism and so on. But I imagine you still had in your head somewhere this vision of like, I want to own a restaurant. This is kind of like deep in my DNA, like being a professional chef. Like at some point, I'm going to need to go and back into this world, and I'm going to need to tell people that I'm vegan, and that's going to make things difficult for me. How how did that land? With you approaching it, and then actually when you came to telling people.
Well, I had mixed reviews, of course. I mean, like my family, especially. In Michigan, you're pretty much raised on meat and potatoes for 3 meals a day. And so my dad's like, well, then what are you going to eat? And I told him, too, on top of that, I'm not taking a restaurant job where I have to cook meat. And he's like, well, why are you limiting yourself all of a sudden? He said, that seems really stupid.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I mean, of course, I think that when anyone goes to change and then you tell your peers about it, everyone kind of takes it a little bit personally. Like, well, what's wrong with the way that we're doing things right now?
Right. Yeah.
But I'm very chronically optimistic, and I also have a big fat mouth, and I am not afraid to say how I feel about things. So it went decent, and I think that everybody started asking a lot of questions, even though I didn't like the way that they were asking questions, and they were very like leading and condescending, and questions that were meant to make me feel stupid. I already felt pretty grounded in my decision, so I was just kind of like, this is why, and you're wrong and I'm right, and I don't care. So yeah, I think it created conversation.
Absolutely. I bet it did. I hope you don't mind me asking this question, but I wanted to ask a question about going on to something like Hell's Kitchen with all of its high profile, being a vegan chef, and then cooking omnivorously, cooking for that audience. Was that very much a kind of like something that you had to wrestle with a little bit about, there's the great exposure on one side, and I can tell this, story about veganism, and I can have that conversation versus, but I've still got to cook animals. How did you kind of square that? What was your kind of approach to that?
That's a really good question. Actually, when Hell's Kitchen first called and they identified that I was vegan, and they told me, you're going to have to cook meat. Are you okay with that? I told them no. And then I hung up the phone. And I was really upset, though, for like 2 weeks. I was like crying. I was like, I think I missed out on something. I think that something really good is supposed to come out of this, even though it feels evil, cooking meat.
Yeah.
So I called them back. But right before Hell's Kitchen had called, I had like 2 other opportunities, like big opportunities in LA present themselves to me. And the first one was going to be a vegan job, cooking for like a celebrity, being his private chef. And then last minute he's like, hey, but I still need you to cook meat and I got hired. I was there cooking. And after the first week, he's like, I'm going to need you to cook meat for my friends. And I was like, no. And I left. And I was like, fuck. I was like, all right, it's going to be okay. Like, we're following our morals. Something good is going to come. Literally 2 weeks later, someone contacts me through, I think, like Indeed or Career Builder or something. And they're like, hey, we want you to be the executive chef for this cafe that we're taking over. We're going to make it vegan. And I was like, amazing. This is it. This is why I had to turn down that to get this.
Yeah.
And the one partner's vegan. And I'm communicating with him the whole time. And then his business partner comes in right as I'm about to sign contracts with them. And he's like, oh, and just to let you know, we're going to need to see a menu for meat because we want to keep our clients, the prior customers that were coming to this location to eat meat, we want to keep them too. And then I was like, fuck. Like, wow. So then I said no to that. And then like 2 months later, maybe less than 2 months. Anyways, Hell's Kitchen called. And so that's why I was like, okay, all right, I'm doing it. So, yeah.
And did you kind of like at that point kind of think, this is the third time I've been called into to cook in this way, that there must be something saying you need to have this conversation with omnivorous folk, and what bigger stage to do it on.
Pretty much. I mean, that's why I full sent it, and I just had to kind of grapple with that fact that I was going to be cooking meat and a
Yeah.
lot of it. And my biggest fear was that it was going to be for nothing because the vegan community would reject me because I was cooking
Right.
meat. But that hasn't been the case at all. They've been so supportive and like so loving and just like so excited that there's a vegan on Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah.
It's been awesome, the support that they've given me. So none of my fears came true. And I mean, the show was hell. The show was absolute hell. Like I was having nightmares
Yeah, I bet.
every single day, like of me, like because you prep before service. They don't show that on TV, but you're prepping before service,
Yeah.
and you're cutting up all of the beef for like the beef tartare. And I kept having this dream every night that I'd be cutting up the beef and then cutting myself, but it didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't like in pain in the dream. It just seems like, I don't know. It's just like my conscience was screaming at me every day. And I wasn't really sleeping on set because you sleep on set 6 days a week.
Right.
It was pretty nuts.
Wow. I can only, well, I can't imagine really. It's like so much going on for you at that particular point. You know, you've embraced veganism. This is a moral decision you've taken, but you've got this incredible, talent for cooking. You've been doing this for years. It's a career you've invested in. You've obviously had a long-standing admiration for Chef Ramsay and wanting to work in his. We'll call it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I know from some of the episodes, it's perhaps admiration might be too light a word, but there's that long-standing. There's that long-standing admiration there. So it must have been just a hell of a quandary, like coming into that, and then, like you say, the thing I hadn't really thought about is the day-to-day living of it. The 6 days a week, the intensity of it. It must have been, it must have been quite a challenge, and now it's out on air. Do you kind of feel like you're reliving things?
I've never experienced a panic attack before until watching the episodes back. I get so anxious for myself.
Really?
I'm like, oh my God, I know exactly what I'm thinking right there. I know exactly what I'm feeling. And it's just, it's overwhelming to the nervous system. Even to watch a reality show, especially one produced by America, it's just like with the music and the sound effects and everything else. I mean, it's nuts. It's seriously nuts.
How much is there like lost in the edit? In terms of like how much is, the conversations that you may have had, the maybe about veganism or just beyond that. Is it a challenge to think, was that how I was in that episode, or was it the way it was edited?
This might come to bite me in the ass later, but so far, up until I think we're on episode 7. Maybe 8, I think 7.
Yeah.
Everything that has been shown, I feel, is incredibly accurate, which is why it's so difficult to watch, because I'm like, it's not even a lie. I said those things. I felt those things. I did those things. And then you're watching and you're just like, all right. But I will say that they lose a lot of, they show the fractals. They show the fractals of your personality that they want to show. But they're very real fractals of who you are. Yeah. And they do miss a lot of, I wish it was more of a reality TV show in the sense that they showed more of the dorm life, because the bond between the whole cast and the conversations that we were having about veganism, oh my gosh, there were a lot of them. So it was really great.
I was going to ask specifically about that, the dorm life, the 6 days a week, the camaraderie that's built up. Like I was saying before about, reading a little bit into the kind of world of professional chefs and speaking to a few, this theme of the times being incredibly tough, this incredible kind of pressure cooker environment actually kind of, often bonds people together very closely. thinking about, going through that experience, it's incredibly unique, even in the world of chefs, being on a TV show, a reality TV show with that higher profile, all of those kind of things. I'd imagine that bond is only deeper. But was did you find the veganism kind of getting in the way, maybe from a chef standpoint, insofar as, other chefs being aware you couldn't taste things and that your experience was different to theirs, and, so on and so forth?
Um, Honestly, no. I feel like veganism was the only thing that was like keeping my head on my shoulders because I went into it knowing that I don't care what happens. Like, I thought I'd go onto the show and I'd be the first one to get kicked off because one, I'm vegan,
Mm,
two, I've been out of the industry for a while. I hadn't cooked in 3 years prior going on the show because I had still been like working in sales. And um, yeah, it was the one thing that I knew that I could ground into that would just
mm,
like take me to where I needed to go. And that was my big issue cooking meat too, is because I grounded into this lifestyle because I hurt people and I hurt
yeah.
myself. And so all of a sudden I'm choosing deliberately to go against my morals to cook meat. And I just knew that as long as I was like still expressing myself and expressing that I'm a vegan and not consuming the meat and doing everything that I could
Mm,
do to just be as in integrity as I could be, that everything was going to work out, everything was going to be fine, and my career would go where it needed to go. But I just knew that I couldn't just decide to like not be vegan or something or just say like, yeah, it's okay to taste the meat. I
yeah.
knew I couldn't do that and I didn't want to,
Yeah.
but there were times where like everyone's grilling you. They're like, why didn't you taste the fucking meat? Why couldn't you just taste it and spit it out? You're hurting the team, whatever. And it's just like, you don't know what I know. So again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, my question to you was like, I noticed that you're thinking a lot and I wanted to know what was going on.
Yeah, I just think it's a really difficult quandary, and I don't think anyone can really make a judgment without being in your shoes. I can imagine people would, one way or the other, but I think, you know the viewership of something like Hell's Kitchen's, what, 7 million in the US or something like that. It's a big show on a big network with huge coverage, and the talking point of there being a vegan chef who is talented. I mean, that's publicity that you can't put a price on. From a veganism standpoint, like, we're trying to, what are we trying to do? We're trying to help more people understand what veganism is and maybe make some positive changes in their life. So on the one hand, you've got that argument there, which is like, you have to be amongst it to, like, I think somebody said to me before, like, if all you're ever doing is speaking to vegans, then who are you? Where's your activism? Where who what are you doing? And if, we talked about earlier, if the last point before food goes to a consumer is the chef, then, is that there's a very, very strong argument for somebody being in that world still, with one foot in one camp and one foot in another, and taking people along that journey. But it's on a personal level, like, I don't know, I could do it. There's the like you said, the sort of the feeling of doing things, using animal products, using parts of what we're living beings, that would be very, very hard to square. So it's like there's this kind of feeling of greater good versus this. So yeah, I think that's what was running through my mind, is like, I don't know what I'd do, and I don't think I could. I could have a value judgment on it. I don't think it would be right to judge somebody, certainly not negatively, for doing that, because you could very well turn the mirror back and say, well, how many non-vegans have you spoken to? Because I've just spoken to 7 million, and one of the biggest chefs in the world, has talked about, has said the word vegan, has talked about veganism because of you. So, that's I think that's pretty compelling as a reason to do it. But on a personal note, I bet it was, without a pun on the title of the show, pretty hellish.
Thank you for putting into that context. That's very sweet. I will say, like, I haven't received a lot of negative judgment. I think I've received actually like 3 hate DMs, but
Really?
but I've received over 100 easily, like actually like long
Wow.
messages of people just being like, "Hey, thank you." And yeah, the 3 hate messages are like this one lady, Nancy. I won't say her last name, but her name's Nancy, and she literally on her Instagram it's just pictures of her taking pictures of her TV and just shit posting
Wow.
her remarks. So I was like, yeah, all right, well, thank you, Nancy. I do appreciate your review. It's very at so very British. They would say the reviews were good. Or I would say I wasn't sure what to make of it.
Yeah, that definitely means that you weren't particularly impressed with it. Yeah, that sort of seems strange. Like whether you agree, disagree with it. I think, and I've had this discussion with people before, and I think this is sort of an interesting point. It's kind of those without sin cast the first stone. The entire world in which we live is non-vegan. We kind of have to remember that. I think the cash we use. I was talking to somebody about bank accounts the other day, and you have a bank account with, in Britain, HSBC, or I don't know, they are investing in stuff that you disagree with. Morally, they are investing your money that you're the biggest chunk of cash that you have, your annual salary, is being poured into fossil fuels, into animal agriculture, into industries you don't agree with. So to take a picture of your TV that's the TV company's probably taking sponsor money from X, Arla, who a dairy company, and whoever. There's probably money pouring through that you wouldn't agree with, but I think it's really difficult to make it as binary and as simplistic to say Josie's a terrible person because she's a chef and she cooked meat on that TV show. I think.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Difficult.
The world of duality that we live in, of right versus wrong. We label things as right versus wrong just to navigate.
Yeah,
our world.
Absolutely, and especially I think in 2021 culture. I don't want to not put all the blame on social media because I think it's a complex situation, but it's the complexity of an argument is kind of reduced to 140 or whatever characters, and so we sometimes miss this the complexity of the debate, which I think is, to answer the very long answer to your question, is kind of what I was thinking about as you were answering that.
Oh no, we love long answers here, both you and I.
Take 3. So yeah, we were just talking about that particular the challenge of that particular decision, and it generally being received positively, which is I think very good news actually, and kind of statement a statement that I think proves probably that much of the quote unquote vegan community is probably sees the benefits as outweighing the obvious challenges that you'd had to go through in being on the show, etc. I'm interested in thinking about the and appreciate, these shows. I don't know how it works, but I'd imagine it would be quite difficult to have much time really to have like deep conversation. But thinking about Chef Ramsay particularly, and his reaction to you either on camera or off camera about the veganism and so on. How was that? What was that relationship like around that particular subject?
Well, we did have a one-on-one chat about it, and he said, I was expecting you to be really squeamish and like very hesitant and
Right.
just kind of like, he made this face. He was like very It's like, and you're not. He was like, I wasn't prepared for that. So, you've really shown me that being a vegan isn't necessarily what I thought. And I appreciate that. And I was like, so I'm trying to picture, when he was talking to me, I'm trying to picture what he was picturing prior to me. And I just picture like probably like some white, scrawny, like bones about this big. I don't know what he had in mind, but it was definitely the stereotype of, I guess, what a typical carnivore would imagine a vegan to be. And also the producer. I think that this was a grander orchestration. I mean, this was, I really feel like it was a divine orchestration, because the producer, the executive producer, Gordon Ramsay is obviously an executive producer, but one of the other executives, I think she is a new executive producer to the show, and she was vegan.
Right.
And she told me, she's actually now my next door neighbor in Los Angeles. I swear to God. She got the apartment next to mine. And
that's crazy.
She told me, she's like, yeah, we had to convince Gordon to allow vegans and vegetarians on the show. She said it was a big deal. So it was like we had a couple vegans in the game. And I think that, it's just obviously more and more people are going vegan. So it's just reflecting in the corporate world, which is good, because the corporate world is, the people with the power help make the shifts for that eventually meet the rest of the population. So, I think that it'll just continue to grow more and more. And even before I was on the show, Gordon Ramsay, I mean, I really have to give props to the guy, because I understand where he's coming from with his perspective on veganism, because obviously I shared it before going vegan. I was like, fuck, how am I going to be the vegan and a chef at the same time? But he said, it was published in an article, he's like, I think we all need to eat a slice of humble pie. And I was like, oh. So he's open-minded, and he's obviously a business owner and an innovator, and he has to keep up with the times. So I think he will go vegan, to be honest with you.
Do you think?
Oh yeah, I think so.
He'd be coming to you for tips, I'd imagine.
If he did, that'd be a dream come true. It's getting a little hot in here.
You're blushing already. He's not here. You can't smell his cologne.
Stop.
I think that was the quote, wasn't it? Oh,
There were a few. You chose one of a few.
Indeed. I want to ask you a question, a broader question about vegan food and and particularly coming at it from the restaurant business. And I asked this question because a while back I spoke to a chef in the UK called Andy Hogman, who runs an amazing restaurant called Alta in London, and he had absolutely Google. And if you get chance whilst you're over in the UK to visit, I'll send you a link later so you can check out the restaurant. But it's amazing food, and he had a really interesting standpoint, which was in his view, and he, similar to yourself, had gone through kind of the kind of classical high end training, if you like, as a chef. That was it was a passion, a career. He wasn't flipping burgers. This was he was a serious chef, and it went vegan like yourself, and then had to think about, well, what does this mean for me and the skills I've got and so on. And he had a really interesting view insofar as he said most vegan food in restaurants is not good enough. Is from the standard point of view, the option that you get is a fairly bland vegan burger, often like a jackfruit burger or something like that. And he said, ultimately, we need to hold vegan food to as high a standard as omnivorous food. Otherwise, we're always going to have that kind of not really a compliment, that kind of statement where somebody says, "Yeah, it's not bad for vegan food." I'd love to get your view on that. Do you think he's kind of right with that assessment that vegan food in the main, I appreciate there's many restaurants and chefs who are doing amazing work in that space, but in the main isn't good enough, and we need to raise the bar?
Oh, I absolutely 100% agree. I think, too, I don't know, I would love to, I can't wait to see the menu. Definitely send me the link. Because I'm definitely going to eat there before I go. But I also think we need to stop with this, like, fake meat bullshit, to be honest with you. Because that's where I think that sentence, it's good for vegan food because people are still, the mind still wants to compare to what it knows. And I'm sorry, you can't turn soy into bacon. I love bacon. I haven't had bacon in 6 years, but you can't turn soy into bacon. And unless if you're creating some sort of magical piece of technology, but even then, I don't even want to put that into my body. That's so far away from what we're even supposed to be ingesting in the first place. I mean, I was a junk food vegan. Don't get me wrong. Like, I was a junk food vegan for the first 2 years of being vegan. I don't think more than like 6 cups of vegetables entered my stomach. But now it's like we should be treating vegetables the way that the world treats meat. Like to that high of a level where people are like, this wet aged brisket, this dry aged brisket, it was aged for 26 days, then we marinated it for 2 weeks, and then we smoked it, and then we, seared it, and then we finished it in the oven. And then vegetables are like in the restaurants, like people are serving like a hummus and vegetable sandwich or falafel and hummus, or they're just like, it's like steamed broccoli. Dude. Like, why are we not brining and fermenting and marinating vegetables? And why are we not treating them with the same care that we treat these pieces of meat? Because that's also, I think, every chef's like excuse is like, when you buy a chef a half of a pig and you say, here you go, turn this into whatever you want. I mean, I'm sorry because I know vegans are listening to this, but the chef will make bacon, they'll make pig belly, they'll make all these things from it, and they'll treat it like the cuts need to be perfect because nothing is going to go to waste. And this is how the chef puts his heart or her heart into, or their heart into the meat, and that's how it's justified. Is, well, this was this meat was given to me, and I take really good care of it, and I respect it, and I appreciate it, and then I serve it. But it's like we can still do that with vegetables, and it's not we're not imposing our will on another being's life. So it's interesting to me that we're just barely paying attention to vegetables, just making them edible, just edible. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel very strongly about this. I could go on a 3-day rant, to be honest with you.
You feel free to. I think you raise a incredibly valid point, and thinking about the care, the passion, and actually um, I guess the skills that have been passed down, that have been taught, that have been shared between chefs over generations. We talk about classically trained chefs, which sort of in that sort of sentence suggests there is a history and so on. And like you say, I think we're probably coming at this from the sort of quote unquote vegan mainstream is probably coming at this from the angle of how do we just replace everything that existed with a vegan. We don't want anybody to miss out, rather than thinking we want to teach somebody something new. We want to create something that they haven't tasted before. So yeah, it's fascinating thinking about it, and then thinking to this theme that we sort of started off with about chefs being the last line before food hits the consumer, hits the plates, and so on. Do you think then actually what we need to do, rather than investing in fake meats and technology to overcome the kind of challenge of converting people, if you like, if that's the kind of mission, to veganism, what we probably need to, or where we need to in the vegan community invest further, is into chefs, into that kind of that final stage before the consumer, so that people do know how to do this. I asked this question because I spoke very early on in the podcast. It was about episode 7. I spoke to a local restaurateur that I know, and who runs a vegan restaurant, and they said one of the biggest challenges that they actually have is hiring people, with the right skill level to cook the vegan food that he wanted to cook in his restaurant. So do you think that is actually, if you like, the crucial piece of the puzzle that's missing from the helping the vegan community grow, is breeding a new generation of chefs?
I think that could be a huge piece of the puzzle. Absolutely. Aside from chefs, I mean, what makes chefs, what makes people need to go to chefs is, I think, the lack of education of what health is and what food should be. I feel as though, I mean, we turn to restaurants because, of course, restaurants are simple and they produce, food that is quick and usually more expensive than what we need to be paying for food. But we do it because we don't have time. And I think that when we can educate ourselves and other people of like what's truly to be prioritized in life, which is our health, and knowing that with proper health everything else will come, so we can stop striving all the time for like all these other things that we want as human beings. I think that, I think remembering what food is there for is most important, because I have a lot of respect for chefs who can create a whole experience by appeasing to the senses. But like there's this whole like wave of like molecular gastronomy and like this like, we're like putting food in chemical baths to like create a sphere of like caviar from carrot juice or like something, because it's gonna like burst in your mouth when you eat it. It's like, cool, but what is that actually? What's the return on my investment when I pay 20 pounds for a meal? What's the return on my investment for me later? We have to start thinking about the cause and effect of food. I mean, that really is like the most, when you focus on your food and what you ingest, that is the most sincere way, I think, to invest in yourself. Because then when you plan your day around the food that you're going to have to make sure that you're eating good food, you can trust that everything else is going to fall into place exactly as it needs to.
100%. just a thought raced through my head as you were talking about that, and I'd again like to get your view on it. And I appreciate this is a overly simplistic question, and I'm asking you to be a spokesperson for far too big a group of people, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Thinking about just thinking about, like, from your experience over in the States in the last kind of 18 months or so, do you see any signs, any positive signs that the kind of pandemic, that COVID, etc., has made, even if it's a proportion of society, but a proportion of kind of American culture more aware of their health and what they ingest? Like you said there, about that, the importance of that, thinking about what we value in life. It made me think about this last 18 months has caused many of us to, and I appreciate that many of us who've had the luxury to be able to do this, but have had time to pause, if you like, or at least their pace of their life has slowed, whilst they can work from home, whilst they maybe have had their children, their families with them, etc. And of course, it being the nature of it a health emergency, it's probably made some people think. There's also obviously the potential for it being connected to animal agriculture and so on. Do you see any signs of that? There being some links drawn with folks?
I think so. I feel like I've experienced the shift. I think in society we're closer than ever in the States. I think that we celebrate now that we can just hug each other.
Yeah.
Which is like something that we took for granted before. But yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be cold or seem so privileged to say that. I mean, I really, of course, there was like, we can talk about all the downsides.
Yeah.
Of
Of which there are many,
of the
absolutely.
pandemic. But on the I don't think that anything good can come until we experience great suffering. And that's only because we're ignorant to what we don't know, and so that's what is kind of created for us by whatever you want to call it. We're meant to suffer in order to expand, question, whatever. So I mean, yeah, I think that this pandemic has really been like a forced meditation for the whole world. For the first time ever, we all were in something together, and we were all suffering from the same thing, and we weren't seeing it as like, well, your suffering is greater, your suffering is less than, and your suffering is justified because you did this. It's like, none of us did anything. None of us, and you can still see in the news articles, we're still trying to blame China, we're still trying to blame scientists, we're still trying to blame somebody for creating this disease. I'm sorry, but we don't have the answer. We don't know for certain. We can be as logical about it as we'd like and try to create evidence, but I mean, I really think that this is probably one of the greatest things that could have happened for us to be able to catalyze our growth. And we haven't fully realized that yet. We're still in suffering mode, of course. And I think it's a good place to be, even though it doesn't feel good, even though it's, really shitty at times, not only for our mental health, but I mean, I really feel terrible saying that because it's pointed to so much death and so much turmoil, like just deep turmoil for people.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard to say, but I'm chronically optimistic, and I'm not going to stop because that's the only thing that keeps, I think, anybody going is the choice to pursue the positive perspective.
Yeah.
Rather than just sit in the muck.
No, I'm with you. I think it like you say, it is incredibly hard to think about. Even as I was phrasing the question, it's incredibly hard to think about positives whilst you're in the, in the eye of this, and you think about, lost loved ones and people that who've suffered and suffered tragedy, and at the sort of worst end of the scale, and then right up to people's economic losses and their their businesses and so on, and things they've built for years. There's so many, like you said, we can talk about those negatives for forever, and they're well documented. But I think we do have a sort of an option, if you like, on the mindset we adopt, going forward. I appreciate that's a simplistic way of viewing it, but we do have a kind of an option, and I, like you, I think I choose to try and think about things positively going forward, and what could we, what kind of a world could we reimagine, based on what we've been through collectively. Like you say, it's a very interesting point, actually. I've not heard anyone kind of articulate it like that, but you're absolutely right. There's very, very few experiences that we've had that have galvanized the world as a community in this kind of way. Everyone going through the same thing. But yeah, no, I appreciate your insight. It's probably a very unfair question to make you the spokesperson for, but I think
I'm really glad that you asked those questions, and because what you're actually forcing upon me right now in a great way is like, well, how honest do I want to be on a podcast? Because my honest perspective is fully optimistic and completely disregards the downsides.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I appreciate you asking those questions, because those are the tough questions that everyone is afraid to ask, especially in like a public setting. But they're so needed. So yeah, thank you.
I appreciate you answering. One final sort of question for you, Josie, is where do you go next? Is the vision of like a vegan restaurant of your very own still the kind of future, or I imagine it's probably a chain now, or a global franchise? But what's the kind of the plan for you?
The dream is a global franchise, like the size of McDonald's. That would be best case scenario. And I mean, I'm not trying to be like a Jeff Bezos. I would rather, what I want is to have, like, it would be wonderful to have a business the size of McDonald's, but then use those millions of dollars to create new infrastructure for the world that is sustainable, and to create programs that help the people where they're not reliant upon a government, but they can be empowered and self-sufficient. Yeah, it's in, a first location is in the works, but I can't say much more other than that. And it's still, I want to make sure I'm in bed with the right person, for sure. So I'm really excited, and I hope it works out. I hope it goes through, because he being like the investor / business partner, he seems to be very on board with the vision of ending food deserts in the US.
Yeah.
And being able to just provide good tasting food. It doesn't need to be some creative Michelin, like, this is what Josie's food is. It's like, no, like, let's just have decent tasting food that is high quality, and it's vegetables where you can get it at the same cost of fast food. Like, that's what we need. So, in my opinion, and of course I think I'm right. So,
well, I concur, and I think you are absolutely the person to head that up. And if you did have the Bezos level of wealth, I'm sure you wouldn't shoot yourself into space. I'm sure you'd do something good with it. So I hope. If you could shoot him into space and leave him there, that would be fantastic. But there you go. Which does actually lead me on to the final piece, which is where would folks go about finding out a little bit more from you, Josie?
well, you can email me if you want. I don't care. Instagram is obviously the best for me. I like to send voice memos to people. You don't have to send voice memos to me, but I will definitely send a lot of voice memos, like a lot. And if you want any recipes, you want to connect, you want to ask me any further questions, you want to say, hey, you know what, I'm not a big fan of what you said, you know, in whatever British way you want to say it to me. Or you just say, it wasn't my favorite thing that you said. Any sort of peanut gallery commentary would be greatly appreciated. I love connecting to people, regardless of your opinion or whether you're vegan or not. So, yeah. Instagram is Vegan Chef Josie, Josie. Thanks for letting me plug myself.
I'll pop a little link in the show notes as well for folks. And I think for folks who can get hold of season 20 of Hell's Kitchen, I'm right in saying we 8 episodes in and there's a little pause for the Olympics. Is that right?
It's true. It's true what you're saying.
There you go. Check me out on the US TV knowledge. So you can watch the rest of the season after post Olympics and see Josie in action. So yeah, thank you so much, Josie. It's been amazing chatting with you. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been so lovely chatting with you. I hope we do this again sometime, and I hope that we have extraordinary connectivity.
We will, I'm sure. Speak to you again.
Yes.
Cheers, Josie.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
I just moving around like 2:30 for 20. I had a radar hit. And it was green, looked like Johnny Dots. And there was something there. It looked like it looked like a bird. It looked like them getting a rock. I mean,